February 1st, 2022. Two American missionaries drove out to an address on Tennyson Road in Chelmsford. Their visit was triggered by a troubling situation. Earlier that morning, they'd received an alarming message from a young woman they had previously known well, someone they'd communicated with calmly and at length before. But today was different. She had reached out several times asking for help, then suddenly sent a message saying she was okay. They pressed the doorbell. The house stayed quiet. A second press made no difference. Calling her cell phone didn't help either. The call went through, but no one picked up. I'm sure you'll agree. When someone first signals trouble and then disappears, it raises red flags and makes you uneasy. One of the missionaries remembered neighbors mentioning a loud woman's scream some hours earlier. That memory only heightened their concern. The house looked almost barricaded, curtains drawn tight, total silence, not a hint of movement. They called the police. The patrol officers arrived quickly. They knocked on the door, identified themselves, and asked for it to be opened. There was no answer. After a brief discussion, they made the call to force entry. As the officers began to push against the door, it slowly gave way. In that moment, it became clear. Something inside had gone terribly wrong long before. Hey everyone! Before we dive into today's story, I just want to ask you to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and drop a comment down below. I put a lot of effort into bringing you real, true crime cases from all around the world. Only authentic stories here. Your support really helps the channel grow, and I truly appreciate any interaction. To understand what was about to unfold, we need to go back into the past, to the very beginning of the journey of the woman whose name would later appear in the Chelmsford police reports. Her name was Ashley Ann Wadsworth. She was born July 25th, 2002, in Vernon, British Columbia, a small, quiet Canadian town about 170 miles from Vancouver. Raised by Kenneth Wadsworth and Christy Jandren, Ashley was very close to her older sister, Haley. People described her as open, friendly, energetic, the kind of person who could strike up a conversation with just about anyone. Her life was full of activity, swimming, skiing, tennis. She never passed up a chance to try something new. Despite Vernon's provincial calm, Ashley always felt drawn to the world beyond her hometown. Europe especially fascinated her, and among all the countries there, the United Kingdom stood out. Her family recalled that her desire to see England started back in her school days, long before she ever had any online acquaintances. After high school, Ashley planned to continue her education and pursue independence. Her dreams were filled with travel, experiencing other cultures, and living life in another country. Quiet Vernon made her feel safe, but it also made her realize there was a whole world outside that small town she hadn't yet explored. And that very drive, that longing for more, ultimately led her across the ocean to new people and places she had previously known only through a screen. Ashley's fascination with Europe gradually turned into a deeper interest in getting to know the people who lived across the ocean. Back in 2015, she was just 12 years old and didn't have a phone of her own. Instead, she used the family laptop to chat with friends and see what life looked like for teens around the world. It was on that same laptop that she first came into contact with someone who would eventually change the course of her life. A friend of Ashley's suggested she connect online with a teen from England named Jack Seppel. He was 16 at the time. Their first messages were casual, short texts, exchanging photos, talking about school and hobbies. The age gap didn't seem like a big deal because everything remained light and friendly. For Ashley, Jack was more a curiosity, someone from a faraway place, not a potential partner. He was like a window into a world she'd only read about. Ashley's parents were aware of the conversations. Her mom, Christy, was cautious from the beginning. She wasn't convinced the boy in the photos was who he claimed to be, but since the chats happened out in the open, right there in the family living room, and sometimes included video calls, her concerns never turned into restrictions. Over the next few weeks, the casual messages turned into longer conversations. They started talking more about their lives, their downtime, and the differences between Canada and the UK. Jack spoke openly about his hometown of Chelmsford, where he lived with his mother. That only deepened Ashley's curiosity about a country she had always dreamed of visiting. Their communication became constant. They messaged daily, and video calls became part of their routine. It brought them closer, though at that point Ashley still saw it all as a distant connection, not something serious. But with time, that friendship shifted into something more emotional. Ashley began sharing school stories with Jack while he opened up about things going on in his world. For her, this was a new experience, one that gave her the sense of connection to someone living a completely different life. In the beginning, there was nothing to suggest that this online bond would grow into something so central to her future and teenage decisions. And yet in that quiet, almost innocent beginning, lay the foundation for feelings that would later shape her fate. Ashley and Jack's online conversations evolved into a steady, almost daily exchange that lasted nearly 7 years. It became a major part of Ashley's teenage life. Jack would send her gifts regularly: clothes, jewelry, stuffed animals. To the family, it seemed generous at first, but over time, it started to feel like a way to keep Ashley's attention tied to him. As they both got older, their connection grew more complicated. Jack began to show signs of jealousy. He worried that Ashley might be getting close to other guys around her. If they argued and she blocked him, he'd make new accounts to reach out again. Sometimes, he even messaged her friends or Haley, Ashley's sister, which raised concerns among those watching from the outside. There were times when Jack dated other girls, but those relationships typically ended in conflict. After each breakup, he would reach back out to Ashley, insisting it had all been a mistake. She tried to pull away, but he always found a way back into her life. In 2018, when Jack was almost 20, he got a tattoo of Ashley's name. She was 16 at the time. To Ashley, it seemed like proof that he was serious about her. But in her family, the move raised red flags. Christy tried to explain that getting someone's name inked like that was a little too intense, but Ashley didn't see it that way. Not then. She didn't yet recognize the warning signs for what they were. As time passed, Ashley's connection with Jack became increasingly unbalanced. She made efforts to walk away from the relationship, but Jack reacted emotionally, making promises to change, pleading for another chance. Believing he could improve, Ashley would give in and reconnect. Over time, it turned into emotional dependency, not in a physical or financial sense, but in the belief that he was the only one who truly understood her. This idea took hold long before she ever thought about meeting him in real life. What Ashley didn't realize was that by the time their chats became part of her daily routine, there was already a long trail of concerning behavior in Jack's past. None of this had been shared with her. It was all locked away in legal documents and law enforcement records, unseen by anyone outside the system. The earliest documented incident dates back to 2014. Jack, then 15, shared private material involving someone he knew, without getting permission. As a result, a court issued restrictions to prevent further communication. But not long after, those restrictions were broken when he attempted to reach out again. There were also issues reported within the household: damaged belongings, high conflict arguments, situations serious enough that authorities had to step in. In 2017, once the previous restrictions expired, Jack once again attempted to contact the same person. even though she had clearly expressed a wish to cut ties. In 2018, his mother took steps to secure a new court order to prevent further contact, but that too was later violated. That same year, another event was recorded, an unauthorized entry into a care facility for older adults, which led to a minor legal consequence. These situations, though not directly connected, painted a picture of repeated boundary issues and disruptive behavior. By 2020, Jack had started new connections through online platforms. Some of these relationships became difficult. Breakups led to emotional pressure, and there were attempts to prevent partners from walking away. In one incident, a woman left through a window to de-escalate a confrontation. In total, 12 situations were recorded involving concerning conduct or violations of court-imposed guidelines. Ashley didn't know any of this. Jack never brought up his past. Their conversations never hinted at the history buried in official records. As she began planning her trip to the UK, all of this was already on file, documented, archived, and invisible to her and her family. Ashley spent months preparing. By late 2021, she was financially independent and able to cover the cost of her travel, paperwork, and other logistics on her own. In November, her plans became official. She purchased a ticket to England and didn't share many details with loved ones, seeing it as a natural next step in a long-running online connection. Everything seemed calm, methodical, and routine, without any signs of the reality that was waiting for her on the other side of the ocean. The day of Ashley's departure started early. She packed her bags, said goodbye to her family, and just before takeoff, she posted a short message letting everyone know she was already on the plane. To her loved ones, it was a familiar gesture. Ashley often shared moments from her life, and nobody saw this post as anything out of the ordinary. Her parents understood that this trip to Europe was something she had dreamed about for years, and they hoped it would be a safe, positive experience. After landing in the UK, Ashley finally met Jack face to face, for the first time in the 7 years they'd been in touch online. According to those who knew them, the moment was emotional. They had both waited for this for a long time, and it clearly meant a lot to each of them. At first, everything seemed to be going well. They took photos together, visited local landmarks, and Ashley's social media showed her smiling, seemingly at ease with her new reality. Those first weeks were filled with the excitement of something new. She explored the town, noticed small cultural differences, and compared life in British Columbia to what she was now experiencing in Chelmsford. It looked like the change was doing her good. Even her messages to family back home reflected confidence and curiosity. But over time, things began to settle into something more routine. The cheerful photos didn't stop, but behind them, things were starting to shift in ways Ashley didn't fully share with her family. While she was trying to adjust to her new environment, what had started as a bold step toward independence slowly became the beginning of a period that would later prove to be pivotal in her story. The initial weeks after her arrival felt like a continuation of that long-awaited reunion, but it was during this time that Ashley began to experience daily life in Chelmsford. Jack wasn't working. He spent most of his time at home and rarely interacted with anyone offline. For Ashley, who was used to staying active and constantly connecting with people, the isolation came as a surprise. She quickly realized he didn't have any friends, and whenever she tried to socialize or even just talk to neighbors, Jack showed clear signs of frustration. Gradually, small things turned into restrictions. Jack started checking her phone, saying it was about trust, and asking who she was messaging. Then came limitations, not talking to certain acquaintances, not using apps unless he approved. When Ashley gently suggested attending a local church, Jack took offense and demanded she drop the idea entirely. Despite the rising tension, Ashley tried to stay in touch with the missionaries and people from the church community. These conversations had to happen in secret. After each message, she would delete the chat history, afraid Jack might check her phone again and question her about who she was speaking with. Hiding things like that wasn't normal for her, but she didn't feel she had another option. At this point, their household had developed a dynamic where emotional pressure was becoming part of daily life. Jack alternated between acting suspicious and trying to seem caring, which left Ashley confused about what was real. Was it just occasional mood swings, or something more calculated? Ashley hoped the growing tension was just part of adjusting to a new life, that eventually things would settle down. But as each day passed in Chelmsford, her world started to shrink. Her freedom, her options, her sense of control, all of it began to fade. About 6 weeks after moving in, the situation shifted in a serious way. A disagreement that might have ended in silence escalated into something physical. Jack later admitted to his mother that he had put his hands on Ashley. And instead of confronting him, she responded with a minimizing comment. That reaction didn't stop him. If anything, it sent the message that boundaries could be pushed even further. From that point on, Ashley began documenting what was happening. She created a hidden album on her phone, a private space where she saved photos of bruises. It wasn't a cry for help. It was her quiet way of keeping a record of a reality she still couldn't put into words. What followed were more broken items, fresh cuts, and new injuries. At the same time, Jack started staging what he described as emotional breakdowns, taking pills in unsafe ways and blaming his state on his mental struggles. One particular episode marked a turning point. After taking a heavy dose of medication, Jack became unresponsive. Ashley called for medical help. He was taken to the hospital, treated, and eventually discharged. But once back home, nothing changed. If anything, the incident gave him more leverage. He began blaming Ashley for his condition, using the fact that she called for help as ammunition in future arguments. Then, in January, Ashley made her first attempt to leave. A neighbor saw her at the door, barefoot, with blood on her hand, pleading for help. She explained that her phone had been broken and that she was afraid for her safety. Still, she begged the neighbor not to involve authorities. After a short conversation, Jack came outside, apologizing and pleading with her to come back. And she did. That decision, returning to the house that day, would be the last one Ashley made entirely on her own. On the morning of February 1st, a small moment of chance changed everything. A package had been misdelivered, and a neighbor came by to drop it off. While Jack was distracted at the door, Ashley took the opportunity to make a call to her parents back in Canada. That call began with a quiet, desperate request for help. It didn't take long for her family to realize this wasn't just a rough patch. This was something much more serious. They immediately purchased a plane ticket to bring her home and urged her to leave the house right away. Her mother begged her to step outside, to find a neighbor, to wait somewhere safe until help could arrive. Before the call ended, Ashley made a promise. One final attempt to draw a line. If Jack ever hurt her again, she would contact the authorities without hesitation. But there was no time left. As soon as the call ended and the phone was no longer in her hands, the atmosphere inside the house shifted again. Fast. Control gave way to another outburst. What happened next would mark the beginning of something irreversible. Shortly after that call home, things inside the house on Tennyson Road spiraled. Not long after the neighbor left, Jack sent a message to his mother. In it, he admitted that he had harmed Ashley again. He described throwing her to the floor and hitting her throughout the house. These messages were the first clear confirmation of what was really taking place behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Ashley tried to reach out to people she trusted. Using the same phone, she sent several brief messages asking for help, to friends in Canada and to people from the church community in Chelmsford. The messages were short and carried a single meaning. She needed help immediately. Sometime later, replies began appearing in those same conversations, claiming that everything was fine and that there was no reason to worry. Those messages did not come from Ashley. By midday, the tension inside the house had reached a point where there was no room left for discussion. Several attempts by Ashley to leave the room led to another surge of aggression. The final incident began with an attempt to restrain her breathing. After that, Jack picked up a kitchen knife and continued the attack. Court records later documented at least 90 separate wounds, a figure that reflects the scale of what took place. Afterward, Jack recorded a video message addressed to Ashley's sister. In it, he said he couldn't let the situation go and expressed regret for what he had done. That message was never sent. Shortly after, he changed his Facebook profile photo to an image of the two of them standing together at Gatwick Airport, a moment from their arrival that now stood in stark contrast to what had just happened. By that morning, the chain of events could no longer be stopped. The outcome had been determined inside that house long before authorities ever arrived. When silence finally settled over Tennyson Road, the house no longer concealed what had occurred. This is where the timeline circles back to the moment we began with the visit from the missionaries who came to see Ashley for a prearranged meeting. No one answered the door. They called out for several minutes. Their concern became the first external warning sign that led to a call to the authorities. A patrol unit arrived quickly. Officers asked for the door to be opened once, then again. There was no response. After receiving authorization for an emergency entry, they went inside. Jack was found in the kitchen. He immediately claimed he had been defending himself and said that she attacked first. His explanation was disorganized and did not align with the condition of the home or the nature of Ashley's injuries. As officers documented his statements, they quickly began to doubt his account. After being taken into custody, Jack attempted to describe the incident as a tragic accident, saying he never wanted this and that he was only reacting. But the message history, the sequence of events, and the evidence inside the home directly contradicted his claims. At the same time, Ashley's family in Canada received a call from Essex authorities. They were informed that their daughter was in critical condition. There was no time to hesitate. Her parents booked the earliest available flight to the UK, still without clear details, without even knowing exactly what had happened inside the house where their daughter had lived for only a few months. That flight marked the beginning of a long and painful process, one that would involve investigation files, court hearings, and truths they never imagined they would have to face. By the time Ashley's family arrived in the United Kingdom, the investigation was already moving at full speed. Jack remained in custody, and the consequences of his actions were becoming clear to everyone involved in the case. Following Jack Seppel's arrest, investigators quickly gathered the initial evidence. Based on his behavior, a psychiatric evaluation was ordered. Specialists reached a clear conclusion. He fully understood what he was doing and was legally responsible for his actions. This finding proved critical, as it ruled out any attempt to frame what happened as an impulsive episode caused by a mental breakdown. As the investigation continued, authorities reviewed message histories, spoke with neighbors who had heard repeated conflicts, and established facts pointing to attempts to conceal evidence of the crime. Investigators also uncovered messages sent after the incident from Ashley's phone, indicating deliberate efforts to create the false impression that she was safe and unharmed. The court carefully examined nearly 7 years of correspondence, which revealed a steady pattern of increasing control and sustained psychological pressure. In court, the prosecution focused not on a single event, but on years of harmful behavior and manipulation. The judge emphasized that the crime was the predictable outcome of a long escalation, not a sudden or isolated act. The presence of Ashley's family during the hearings allowed the court to fully grasp the depth of the tragedy and the extent of the damage caused. At the conclusion of the trial, Jack Seppel was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 23 years and 2 months before eligibility for release. The sentence was described as a reflection of the seriousness of the crime and the prolonged pattern of abuse that led up to it.